Welcome to the Fireside Chat on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network by Run Try Bike. I am your host, Jason Bahamundi, and the founder of Run Try Bike and the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. I am super excited about my guest today because we're going to be talking about the mental side of endurance sports, which is honestly one of my favorite topics. Peter Falcon, who works with Dr. Erin Ayala at Scatty Sports Psychology, whom you're familiar with. We've had her on our shows before, as she's written for us as well. I'm honored to be able to share his expertise in the area of mental health and performance with you. He is a competitive runner, so when he talks about the mental side of these sports, he knows what he's discussing because he's not only a participant, but he's also been studying it. Before I bring Peter on, please remember to subscribe, rate, review the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network on your favorite podcast platform. It really does help us in generating interest in our shows and our guests and helps us to continue to do what we do. And if you're using Spotify, please leave us a comment. We have 8 shows for you to choose from with various stories and hosts. So I'm sure you'll find one and probably all of them to your liking. So without any more rambling from me, let's bring Peter on the show and let's have some fun. Hey, Peter, how are you?
Pretty good. How are you doing, Jason?
I'm fantastic. Dude, It's been a handful of months since we last chatted, and I'm super excited to dive into this with you today because I know that we're also going to have some articles coming up for our audience to read and really be able to understand your level of expertise when it comes to the mental side of endurance sports. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Happy to be here.
Before we get started, we do have an icebreaker. Question for you. Pineapple on pizza, yay or nay?
I would usually say nay, but actually the other day.
That's it. Great answer. Thanks.
Yeah. I actually had it over at Broadway Pizza, which is a local chain here out in the Minneapolis area. And it was good. I mean, it was combined with like jalapeno bacon on it and lots of cheese and stuff. So I'm going to actually have to go with yay on it now. So
see, this is where I arm wrestle the people who say yay to pineapple on pizza because they always say, oh, it's, with pineapple or with bacon or with ham or with all these other things. And I always say, so it's not pineapple on pizza that you like. You like a whole lunch or dinner on top of
bread. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I was going to say, if you just do pizza with straight pineapple on it, I don't think it could. It wouldn't be a common favorite. I always argue with my wife because she likes a lot of veggies, which I'm okay with, but like I like the straight meat pizzas, I guess, So like the butcher's pizza or
sausage, ham, bacon, throw it all on there.
Yep, load it up. So
Are you a folder? Do you fold your pizza? Do you use a fork and knife? Do you just go straight at it?
Straight at it, hands. Don't use fork and knife unless it's just like really, really hot and I can't eat it. So,
I'm sure there's some mental aspects to how we eat pizza that we could talk about, but you're not here for that. We're here to talk endurance sports. I've been participating in this stuff for 18 years, and the mental side of it has always enamored me. It's always been, my body is going to want to quit, but I can get my mind to move it just one more step, and one more step. When you started running, was the idea that you were going to end up being like a mental health performance coach part of the process, or was it just something that you also fell in love with like I did?
Yeah, it was something that I kind of fell into, to be honest with you. So like when I started running actually competitively at about 10, almost 11 years old. So I was doing, it was all thanks to my dad, and I was a soccer player, basketball, team sports, that sort of thing. And my dad had run in high school and he was like, hey, Peter and Simon, my brother, was like, hey, do you want to try track and field? And they're like, well, we're always pretty fast out there, on the soccer field or on the basketball court or baseball field. But, it's a little bit different to be track fast.
Yeah.
So we started off doing, I think the typical stuff, just exploring 100 meter, 200 meters, tried long jump, tried high jump at practice, did some of the shorter relays, stuff like that. And then kind of settled on like, 200, 400 kind of be a primary events for the first summer. And then did all right, but then my dad was like, well, why don't you boys try distance running? So towards the end of the summer, we did a little training with the distance squad, and actually found that we had a little bit of natural ability, or a little more natural ability in the distance arena. So ran a couple 1,500-meter races, 800-meter races, a mile at the end of the year at this open track meet they had, and had some third, second, first place finishes, and then it's like, maybe I want to try this again next year.
I'm
So
good at this. What do you know?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So tried it again next year. And then I would say that was the year where I started kind of, I wouldn't say falling in love with it, but was like, all right, I think I'm going to keep doing this for a little while. Right. And then did it in middle school along with the summer youth or junior Olympic track and field programs. It's what we call USATF Junior Olympics. And then, once I got to 8th grade is kind of where I started seeing a lot more success, and switched clubs to a fairly more competitive club running at more national meets, and did pretty well there. And was like, all right, this is, I think this is a sport I can do long term. And it's interesting. I remember being so nervous for some of those national meets, when I was a kid. And it's like, man, I could have used, I look back at it, I was like, I could have used an athletic counselor, a sports psychologist, or just a therapist, just somebody to help me get through some of those nerves. I remember feeling like I wanted to throw up or puke, and before meets, and got really, really, really nervous. And was able to work through it and manage it on my own through just my, help of my parents and my coaches and stuff like that. But like, and just my teammates, but it was more of just off the cuff stuff. It wasn't, it wasn't professional stuff.
Yeah.
Where it's like, man, if I would have had that now, it's like I would have told my old self, like, hey, go see somebody, even for, even if it's just a short while to work through some of that stuff, to have some strategies or tools, that would have been really nice. So
we'll get into that in a second here, but I want to go back to the transition. So when you're going from basketball or soccer, where you've got teammates, running is a punishment for a lot of those team sports.
Yeah.
What was that transition like for you from a mental aspect, where sure, track and field is still a team sport, but it's me versus the competition, and not me and 10 other guys or 4 other guys. What was that transition like mentally for you?
Yeah, I think that was the part that was maybe I look back at it now too. It's like, as we're talking about it, and I was like, I wonder if that was probably the biggest, if you want to call it, I don't want to say trigger, but maybe a trigger for that, like, where I remember, like I said, I had run some of the sprint stuff before, and I remember actually, one meet, now that I think about it, like my dad had me signed up for 2 races, and I refused to run the last race. I told him, I was like, I don't want to go out there and do it, Dad. I'm not having fun. And, I think part of it I think was that I wasn't having as much fun right away, but I think I was just dealing with a lot of performance anxiety leading up to those races, because all eyes are kind of on you in an individual sport. Whereas team sport, you've got, obviously you've got your own individual stats and things, but you've got a bunch of guys, girls, or whoever it might be supporting you out there too.
Right.
Whereas like when I got ready for relays, I wasn't as nervous for some of those, even at those big national meets, because I was warming up with my teammates. You felt like you were together as a team running that race, a part of something, right? Yeah. Whereas I don't remember dealing with as much of that as a soccer player. I mean, there was definitely, I think your normal nerves, your normal, right? What we call is manageable, right? But then I didn't see that stuff happen to me until I would say probably when I started running track and cross country a lot more. So.
Did you have an aha moment on the mental aspects when things sort of clicked for you, when you were like, okay, this is different. I'm getting mentally better, not necessarily physically better? Or was it that you were getting physically better that triggered the mental improvement?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I would say there were probably different periods of that, So I would say Gosh, like I said, when I was in 8th grade, going into 9th grade, doing summer track, like I said, I remember being pretty nervous for some of those national meets and stuff. But even before that, there were definitely some aha moments where it was like, gosh, I was racing at the state junior Olympic meet. I remember, and ended up, I think I ended up winning the 1500, which was one of the last events that we had of the meet or whatever, at least individual. I ran the 3K, the 800, the 15, and the 4x8. So all four of them in
Busy.
2 days. And I remember the 1500 just feeling really good in that race and feeling confident, like I'm in. And I think part of confidence was being physically like in just better shape, or the best
Right.
shape that I'd ever been in. And
Yeah.
then we went out to Buffalo, New York, and ran a national meet there. But I remember being very nervous for those. But as I worked into the meet, and gained more confidence each race, I think each race felt better and better and better, I guess,
Yeah.
at least from a mental standpoint, when I was out there. So,
So as you move out of the world of track and field with a team into, you know, endurance sports as an individual, as a hobby now, right? Where
yeah,
you're paying to race and training and stuff like that.
sure.
Um, is there a connection between your track and field days and the now adult runner who's trying to qualify for Boston, let's say, or just get PRs at whatever distances you're racing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a huge, I think the difference now, at least for me individually, is the experience, right?
Okay.
You have a lot of years of doing it, a lot of repetition.
So let me interrupt you there then, because a
Mhm,
lot of our audience is beginners, right? They're trying to figure their way through this sport or sports.
mhm,
Triathlon would be one of them as well.
mhm.
And I mean, gosh, open up any social media platform and there's an influencer telling you that you
Yeah.
should do X or Y, right?
Yep.
Or somebody telling you you're not a runner unless you run a specific speed or a specific distance.
Yep.
And so if they weren't a runner in high school or college, let's say,
Mhm.
or they didn't play team sports for that matter,
Sure.
and they're like, I want to get healthy, I want to get into sports,
Yep.
I want to get into running and that kind
Mhm.
of thing. Like, so how does your experience as an athlete going through that process and getting into the mental health coaching aspect, performance coaching aspect, how do
Yep.
you bring in your experiences to that person?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is normalizing like what they're going through, no matter what level you're at. I think is a big key to that. So, it doesn't matter what, if you're getting into the sport at 50 years old versus, when I got into the sport, I was, fortunate enough to get in it, at 10, 11 years old, right? I think, you know, I guess when you're looking at experience and those sorts of things, it helps, right? But I always tell runners, like, as they're starting training, is taking more of a long-term approach to it,
Okay.
right? And
Yep.
I think that's such a key part, right? Like you had mentioned what, like, you see things all over social media of like, all right, I've got to do, you'll see it in the professional world, but I think you see it in the amateur world too, of like double threshold days, is like all the norm for runners and stuff like that. But really, I think you have to look at like your value system too, as a person and as an athlete. So as a mental performance coach, I'll even ask like my clients to be like, hey, like let's determine what our athlete values are. What are our personal values as well? Do they overlap? I did that several times today, seeing some clients as well. And be like, all right, well, what's your purpose behind this? Because like
That's
my
a great
purpose
question.
now, right? As I'm a dad now. I'm married,
Yeah.
right? I still love to run. I still like to compete. It's interesting. I wouldn't say. I still enjoy competing to an extent, but my priorities have changed too.
Yeah.
So, as a full time, and most everyday runners, right, or everyday triathletes or endurance athletes, you got to work around, a lot of times you're working around kids, you're working around family, you're working around your job, you've got all these different things that you're trying to balance, right?
I will.
Yeah.
I will say it's one of the hardest things that I have had to come to grips with since I started this company. You
Mm.
know, when you decide to start a business, the delusion of
Mhm.
grandeur is I've got all
Yep.
this free time. I'm going to have all this free time. I'll be able to race and run and
Yep.
lift and swim and bike. And the reality is I don't, right? I just don't have that free time.
Yep.
And even when I do have that free time, my mind is on the business, right?
Sure.
How do I grow the business? Oh, I forgot to contact this person or that person. And so, one of the things I've had to come to grips with and have kind of struggled up until recently
Mhm.
is that shift in priorities
Sure.
where racing a 100 miler, for years, I raced a 100 miler and an Ironman in the same year. And
Wow.
that's just constant training, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but it's not something that I could do today. Like I know that I can't do it today. And
Mhm.
it's taken time to get through to that process. And it makes me think about having a professional like you on the team, right? Like, are people coming to you and presenting scenarios like that where it's like, look, I used to do 4 races a year and now I can only do 2. And so there's a heightened pressure on them to
Mhm.
perform in those 2. Whereas if they had 2
Mhm.
additional races,
Mhm.
if they, pardon my French, if they fucked one up, that's okay. I can make it up on the next one, right?
Yeah. Yep. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I get that all the time, and I think that's where you have to be a little more creative. I think that's where, things like, I mean, I do, and this is some stuff that I even do into my training is incorporating time trials. The nice thing about that, and from a mental aspect, is think about it. You've got the ability to control the weather a little bit more, right? You have control over the course you want to do. You
Yeah,
have
great point.
those little things, and a lot of those things, it's like you said, it's like you can have these two big key races where it's 100 miler, an Ironman, a full marathon, a 5K, whatever it might be, a mile on the roads, a mile on the track,
Right.
right? And I know the time trials, it might not feel like, hey, I'm in the same environment and you've got to replicate that, right?
Right.
But you know what? If it allows you to like prep for something like that, a big race or something like that, for instance, I ran the Eugene Marathon and I wanted to do this, 5 mile road race as a tune up. But then, I also coach high school cross country and track. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, we had a track meet that went pretty late the night before. And, I didn't get back home until 10 something, 11 o'clock or so. So I was like, the race was at like 8 a.m. And it was about 45-minute hour drive from where I'm at. And I was just like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be ready to go in the morning. So you know what? I adjusted and was like, you know what? I'm just going to do a time trial the same distance. I had a loop that I knew that was in this neighborhood near mine that's pretty flat and fast. And I did that as a way to simulate that and still
Yeah.
get the same training benefit and at least a similar mental benefit. So that was my version of being creative, right? Obviously, others are going to have their own, uh,
Yeah, I think
abilities.
that's the key to all of this too is
Yeah,
understanding that, you may not get the fanfare of being at an event, but the
yeah,
event in
yep,
your case was really for training.
yeah,
Yeah, you
yep,
might have gotten a t-shirt and a medal when you were done, but the priority for it was training. And so you just did
it
the
was.
training day. I
Yep,
want to ask you about the idea of falling in love with the training because
yes,
before this show, I got on the treadmill and I have a workout that I love doing. It combines hill repeats and speed work
yeah,
on the treadmill.
hmm,
Absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite workouts to do, and I look forward to it. And so, like when you have an athlete who's maybe struggling with the training, like
hmm,
are there any bullet points that you're capable of sharing with us that you might share with an athlete that's like you got to fall in love with the training aspect and because the
yep,
results are going to come down the road no matter what. But
yeah,
if you dislike the training today, those results are going to be hard to obtain. But if you fall in
yes,
love with the training today, then the results become easier.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head right there, Jason, with that part. We talk about do a lot of goal setting with athletes too. So
Yeah.
we've got kind of um, goal setting, like if you want to call it like a flow chart, essentially. So you
Okay.
look at like outcome goals, you've got performance goals, and you've got process oriented goals. And I think what you're referring to when you talk about falling in love with the training is, the process oriented
Yeah.
goals. Those are going to be the small things that you do day in and day out, right? And maybe it's not always the training stuff. Maybe, as you get older and you said you've been competing for years. I know for myself, it's definitely having to, I don't know, I want to say fall in love, but at least improve my liking of other smaller things that I didn't have to
Yeah.
do as much, like, simple things like foam rolling or the nutrition aspect, and being a little more careful with like getting food in my body, like more immediately after workouts, which I've
Right.
done a lot. One thing I've done a lot better at, sleep. I mean, it could be a number of those different things, right? But like, and I also think if you're in a slump, right, and you're training and you're, like you said, you're in that part of like, man, I'm just not really enjoying what I'm doing. Like, don't be afraid to try something new too. you
Yeah.
know?
I think that's the hard part though, Peter,
Mhm,
is the trying something new. And I go back to the idea of social media
mhm,
being why it's hard to do something new, right?
mhm.
The algorithms today, if you talk about running, you're going to get exposed to the running space. If you talk about
Sure.
music, you're getting exposed to the music space. And I think we've become afraid to fail because we're afraid that Susie in Sarasota might not follow us anymore.
Absolutely.
Right? And it's like, give me a
Mhm.
break. Like,
Yeah. Yep.
golly, like try something new and do something different.
Yep.
Because it might also reinvigorate your desire and your passion for the thing that you're losing desire and
Yes.
passion for,
Oh,
right?
definitely, Jason. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you're right. I mean, just to touch on that a little bit too, like, this happened to even me like last year, like having our son, he'll be 2 this week actually. So on Thursday, I was looking for ways to be more creative in my training. Like, how can I try something new, be creative, fit in things, still do what I want, right? I think my kind of going back to the value stuff, like my own values have changed. And some of my values is competition used to be like at the top, right?
Right.
Now it's still, I would say, in my value system there, but it's not number one anymore. Number one is honestly my own physical, mental, and emotional well-being. That's what I like. And I love the process. I like training. I like the structure it provides me. So I tried a new training method that was, by this Dutch runner called Klaas Lok. He was a multi-time national champion for the Netherlands back in the 80s, I think. And he has a method called the easy interval method. And I tried it for almost a full year, not quite. I kind of went back to my normal training after the Twin Cities Marathon. But I was able to pull things, I was able to pull little things that I'm now adding into my training, and I feel like I almost went back into being like, I just needed a break from what I was doing because it was getting stale, and even as a coach, I was able to add in some of those little things too. So like this training is essentially you're doing intervals that are very relaxed intervals, but with lots of jogging rest in between. So they could be 200s, 400-meter
Yeah.
repeats, all the way up to 1Ks, 2Ks, and adding surges into your daily run, stuff like that. But and I've been able to kind of be creative, and here and there, I'll still add in little things like that. And like I said, I think for other athletes, whatever you're doing too, like you said, it's hard because yeah, are you going to be afraid of what others think?
Right.
What's on my Strava, right?
Yeah.
What's on
Yeah.
my Instagram? What's on, like, and I got this idea from, just a runner that I follow. Well, he's, someone I've raced against before, Austin O'Brien. He runs out in Iowa, and he's kind of like myself, where he's in his 30s, and I saw him doing some of that stuff. I read the book like he did, and then I was like, well, I'm gonna give it a shot. I'm gonna take a risk here. So I was like, I'd rather be running than not running.
Yeah.
So, so like let's find a way to keep it going. And like you said, I think it did the same thing. I think you made a good point, Jason, where it's like it kind of, I don't know, allowed me to learn more, I think.
Yeah.
And then it also allowed me to, add in something different to my training. But would I go and do that full training method again? I don't know, maybe in the future, but as of now, it's allowed me to kind of mix things up, I guess. So
Before I
Yeah.
get into the next question, I'll give a shout out. We've got a number of people that have joined us on Instagram. And if you are there, please feel free to drop in a question for Peter. Happy to relay it. Maria, Alex, Kelly, Jenny, Josh, Coach Fitz, thanks for joining us. Christine, Cami, and Ashley, really appreciate you guys being on the show. Drop the questions in. We're talking about the mental health and mental performance side of endurance sports with Peter Falcon of Scatty Sports Psychology. So, we were talking about doing different things. I think that's one of the reasons why I loved triathlon so much. Is that one day you're swimming, one day you're
Yeah.
riding, the next day you're running, and then strength training. But here's where the trap I fell into with triathlon, and I got swept up in data
Mhm.
where on the bike we are talking watts per kilogram,
Yep.
and the lighter you are, and if you're fit, you're pushing the bike just as hard as if you were slightly heavier, but now your watts per kilogram goes up, right? And like I fell into such a trap that it became a disordered eating
Mm.
scenario for me, where
Mhm.
I would be eating, and showing people on Instagram on my personal account, here's what I'm eating today. And it was like, a well curated plate. But what they didn't see was me standing in the pantry inhaling donuts at the end of the night because my body was craving carbs that I was starving it of. And so when you're working with athletes, especially older athletes, but maybe some of the high school and college students as well,
Sure.
athletes, are you seeing eating or disordered eating scenarios come into play, and working with them on that? And
Mhm.
any advice for our audience if they either have it or they know somebody who does?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I saw this. I think the first time I saw this as a prevalent thing was when I worked. I'm originally from Omaha, Nebraska, and that's where I ran in for the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. And
Hmm.
then I was working in their athletic department and working with some of the cross country and track and field team there. And that's kind of where I first saw a fair amount of that, actually. It's interesting. I remember having teammates that actually struggled with it, but at that time, I was only in my undergrad, and I was just I was majoring in nutrition, exercise, health science. So I had a little bit of an understanding of that. And even now, as a therapist, I will say that is not my like primary
Right.
specialized area within the mental performance or the clinical side, but an area that I'm wanting to learn more and more
Yeah.
about because I do see it, and I've had to refer athletes out, whether that's to, I think you also have to be careful in that space because you want to find somebody, because I have friends in that space too, an RD, registered
Hmm.
dietitian, and then
Yeah.
sometimes too, even finding an RD that's got experience working with athletes, much like
Right.
you see in the clinical space too, or the mental performance space of finding people that have the right qualifications and working with those athletes. But yeah, I think sometimes you see people with obviously, that have been in treatment centers with full on eating disorders that are athletes. I read an article actually. This is actually years back when I was in college, about a male athlete that was a distance runner, I think at the University of New Mexico, and how he went through this after getting injured. He had some bad injuries and bad injury cycles where he, naturally put on some extra weight. And then that when he came back, was wondering why his training wasn't going well, and then I realized, well, he didn't realize right away, but realized later on that there was definitely some disordered eating that turned into an eating disorder for him, and he was way underweight, not fueling properly. And I think in the endurance world, that's one area you just want to be very careful with,
Yeah.
and make sure you find the right professionals to surround yourself with
Yeah.
too. So yeah.
One of the things I've been thinking about as we've been chatting is mantras. Athletes have
Mhm.
mantras. I have one of my own, which is relentless forward motion. But as somebody who works on the mental strength and performance side of it, is there a moment where the mantra goes from positive to negative? And I'll give you an example. So
Yeah.
if I'm out there and it's mile 72 of a 100-mile race, and um, I've already sprained my ankle, right? I could look at my mantra on my wrist and be like, relentless forward motion, relentless forward motion. and end up, in the hospital because the twisted ankle gets worse and there's ligament tears. How are we supposed to balance this stuff? Like, honestly, like how are we, if we aren't going to go talk to Peter Falcon and
Yeah.
get educated from him and understand the
Hmm.
tipping point between having a mantra is good to get you to that pinnacle, but then having a mantra is bad because you're going to fall off the cliff of that pinnacle.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when you look at mantras, we always relate that to like self-talk
Yeah.
in sports psychology, right? Or mental health, right? It doesn't
Mhm.
have to be just sports psychology, but one thing that I've learned a lot is like there's a difference between like what we call like positive self-talk and like constructive self-talk,
Okay.
right? So, and the difference, the way I explain it is positive self-talk is, will probably be some of those simple mantras, but even with those, they've got to be things that you believe in. They got to be things that you can use as fuel. It can't just be something that you use and you have, there's no, you're not being intentional with it, I guess is a way to,
Okay.
so that's where the constructive self-talk comes
Yeah.
into play. So, whether that's a mantra or that's, you're battling intrusive thoughts, that
Yeah.
fear of a drop out of a race, which it's interesting. Actually, a lot of studies, this is where I've, I don't know, have you heard of Steve Magnus at all, Jason?
Yes.
Yeah. 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 So I don't know, if any of the audience follows like Steve at
Mhm.
all. I follow him quite a bit, him and Brad Stolberg, and I think they've got
Yep.
all great things. And I can't remember the exact stats, but I remember he posts a lot of different things. And it was like a study done on like elite runners or professional runners. And it was like 80 to 90% or something in that range. Don't quote me on that, but have a thought of dropping out in the middle of a race, even when things are going well.
But why wouldn't they? They're human beings,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
I think that's the thing that we get caught up in as everyday athletes is this idea that elites don't quit, elites don't drop, elites don't, have
Yeah.
negative thoughts and all of this stuff. And it's complete and utter bullshit. Like I
It
can tell
is.
you when I was at Lake Sonoma 3 or 4 years ago, it was a brutally hot day because the event, which normally takes place early in the year, due to COVID, kept getting kicked down the road. And now we were racing in September. I mean, it was so brutally hot and humid. And Lori said that, my wife said that it looked like a MASH unit at the start finish line because people were dropping hand over fist and elites were dropping because I'm not having the day that I had trained for because of the weather, but
Yep.
I'm going to preserve myself because I have another race coming up in a certain amount of time, right?
Mhm.
And I think what happens is we lose the vision of these sports when we perceive the person dropping out to preserve their health at the elite level so they can race again because that's their money, right? Their
Yeah.
livelihood is based on
Yeah.
this.
Uh-huh.
Um, and then we applaud the guy who or gal who didn't have such a great race but stuck it out all the way to the end, and we applaud them and give them the crown and sort of bemoan the person who did DNF for all the right reasons as well. Um,
Mhm.
I wonder how often you're dealing with people who are talking about DNFs or having DNF'd and how do I come back to the next race and how do I perform better and things like that.
Yeah, no, that's a great, those are great examples, especially in I feel like the endurance sport world where you're
Yeah.
doing, whether it's ultra marathons like yourself there, Jason, or triathlons or whatever it might be, because it's like you only get, I think you mentioned this earlier too. It's like, you might only get two cracks at it during the year
Right.
because that's all the time you have, or even professional athletes, right? It's like, they don't want to beat their bodies up so much over racing or anything. So they might have three cracks at a marathon
Right.
during the year. Right. So, one thing we talk a lot about, I just kind of did a workshop on this last week, was kind of mental resilience. Right. But mental resilience isn't kind of what I think people think it is. A lot of people think like, kind of like maybe what you said, it's like you're applauding the person that just grinding through, powering
Right.
through. But a lot of mental resilience actually has to do with overcoming setbacks or
Yeah.
failures, because as athletes, as just people in
Yep. That's
general,
right.
we fail more than we succeed. As cliche as that sounds, it's true though, and then mental resilience also has to deal with like adopting kind of what we talk about in sports psychology as a growth mindset, right?
Mhm.
So being able to learn from those mistakes, those failures, however you want to phrase them, right? Whether that's coming back. I always look at too, like you're probably going to go through some grief and loss stages too.
Yeah.
People don't always think about that when it comes to like injury recovery or having
Burnout.
a burnout, tough performance. But a lot of times you go through those grief and loss stages. You go through you might go through a denial period,
Oh,
a
I
bargaining
went,
stage, all
I
those
went,
things.
I
Yeah.
went through denial after Cocodona when I finished it. The
Mhm.
denial was, oh, I could keep racing. The reality was like, that was the thing. And I had done the thing, and like all the energy that I possibly had left my body. And I was like, I don't know if I want to race another race anytime soon. And then it just became easier to not race, right? It was easier to just go and run and train sporadically
Mhm.
and not race, and kept telling myself, "Oh, it's just because, you had a big event." The reality was the the race that or races that I would have been looking at weren't appealing because I had
Mm.
just done something massive, right? Like
Yeah.
running 250 miles in 4.5 days was a massive undertaking.
That's crazy.
And
Yeah.
the idea of going and running a half marathon or a 50K just all of a sudden didn't measure up, which is total nonsense, right? Like
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
race is a race.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think the big thing is that I mean, kind of what you went through there, Jason. You see it with a lot of like Olympic athletes, So I know Michael Phelps has kind of talked about this too because he's pretty outspoken, just in the mental health space and
Yeah,
stuff. You come off this big high of winning X amount of medals, gold medals, or whatever it might be, right? And then it's like, well, what else do I have left to prove now?
right.
Like
Yeah,
what am I? This was a thrilling thing, and it's like you said, you come off this, if you want to call it a big high or whatever it might be from that goal race, and it went so well that you just feel like, well, dang, what am I going to do now? Like, what else do I have left to work for? Like you said, it's like those little things don't seem as appealing anymore.
yeah, and
So,
then I think the social media aspect for us gets in the way a little bit,
mhm,
right?
yep,
Because you've got people who are like, "Oh, what's next? Oh, what's next? Oh, what's next?" And you sort of feel this pressure from outside forces to go and perform and do something else. And I'm like, nothing. Like, I want to go sit on my couch, man. Like, I just ran 250 miles in the center of Arizona. Like, leave
jeez.
me alone.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for you, how was that though? Like after, like, is that how long did you feel that way? You know,
For a couple of years,
okay.
Peter, honestly, like for a couple of years, I was like, I just
Mhm,
like the idea of racing again just wasn't appealing to me. And it
mhm.
wasn't until honestly about a week ago. I'm training for Javelina, and
Okay.
that's at the end of October. And I said to Lori this weekend, I was like, I want to race more. I want to race again.
Mhm.
Like I had a great month of training in June. And I think that was the switch that was like, okay, you had a great month of training in June. You,
Process.
you did right. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly what we've been talking about.
Yeah. Yep.
And, and so now I'm excited. Like I just registered for a race last night,
Oh, that's
and
awesome. Yeah.
like that desire and that passion to race again has come back because like you said earlier, you're competitive, I'm
Mhm.
competitive, and maybe I'm not competitive the way I was 5 or 6 years ago.
Yep.
In terms of competing against the field, like my mind has switched
Mhm.
to I want to be in the top 10 or I want to be in the top 20
Yeah.
to I want to
Yep.
be the best I can be that day. I want to
Yep.
outperform my own expectations for myself.
Yep. Yep. I think that's important, that internal drive too. It's like you gotta have, and if you can, like you said, like right there for you, Jason, it seems like you were reframing right there.
Yeah,
Like, hey, these are, you know what? It's, I'm 6 years older than I was now, but that doesn't mean I can't still shoot for something that's a little different, right?
that's been a hard thing too, dude.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
you
Same.
know,
Same here.
I
So
this
it's,
morning I was looking at my results because I was sending something to Joe Harden,
yeah.
and I was like, damn, in 2018, I finished in 12th place. I was the first place male 40 to 49 at this 100
Wow.
miler.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm 51 years old now. Could I run a 100 miler? And I think that year I did it, it was like 1911 or 1912 or something like that.
Hmm.
And like immediately I was like, no. But then immediately after that, I was like, yeah, you can. Why couldn't you? Right.
Yeah.
Like, And
Yep.
it's the reframing thing that you're talking about. It
Yeah.
really is the reframing thing. And could I run 1912 today? No, but given enough time to train, I could probably
Mhm.
get back down there again.
Yeah, I've seen it with other athletes too. There's a guy that runs. He trains with a buddy of mine that was with a club that I used to run for, Lincoln Running Company, Nebraska. His name's Jesse, and I remember seeing him. He's in his 40s now. Qualified for the Olympic trials and the marathon not long ago, and PR'd in the half marathon. Not long
Yeah.
ago. And I mean, a lot of what I saw him kind of explain, because he'll go into detail sometimes on his Strava, which is really cool because he's not afraid to show his setbacks and things and
Yeah.
changes. And for him, it was just changing the way he has to train a little bit, kind of like we talked about before. It's like, yeah, my volume might be a little less than what I did, but I've added these other things in, like a lot more recovery, the small things, and it's like I'm actually a lot faster. Well, I am faster than I was 10 years ago, in this distance. So
It's
yeah.
amazing the number of demons isn't the right word, but it's the number of obstacles we're putting up in front of ourselves that we're having to battle through, right?
Hmm.
We're putting the person who's a stranger on the internet, we're giving them a life in front of us, so we're battling them. We're battling ourselves from an age perspective, potentially. We're
Yep.
battling ourselves from a responsibility perspective. You might be a parent now. You might be a new business owner. You might have a new job. You might be living in a new part of the country,
Yep.
and or even out of the country for that matter. And what you're doing is you're comparing yourself to somebody that doesn't exist anymore, right? Like
Hmm.
when I finished first place 7 years ago now, I lived in Dallas, Texas. I now live in LA, right? I didn't own my own business. I do today. I'm 7 years older now than I was then. Like, so trying to compare myself to that person, isn't fair to myself. And I have to fall in love with who I am today so that I can perform for who I am today.
Yeah.
And potentially, maybe I end up beating that guy from 7 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's such a great point there, Jason. The same thing happens to me still at times. And I've got to remind myself too. It's like, when I ran my PR in the marathon, that was 2019, and I had just moved to
Which, by the way,
Minnesota.
if I'm not correct, it's 251, right?
219.51 is
Yeah,
my PR. Yeah.
219.51. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Uh-huh. Yep. That is. Yeah. I was close to qualify. It's 219 was the time at that time. Right. And I think I made some mistakes even later on of like, oh, I've got to do some of the same things that I did in 2019 or the exact same training. But in reality, I'm not the same. I wasn't doing the same things. It's like
Right.
I'm married now. I've got a kid now. I have advanced in my career. All the outside factors that you have to realize that
Yep.
you do, because you're going to run yourself ragged in training too, and you're not going to enjoy the process if you're like, man, well, I crushed the same workout, in this build
Mhm.
up in this race of whenever that was, right? 5 years ago, last year, whatever.
Right.
But you got to look at who you are right now, right?
Yeah.
And you got to look at all those external factors. And the thing is, I think some people are like, well, is that just a way to, kind of cover your ego? But no, a lot of it is you being, I think you just got to be real with yourself, right?
Yeah.
Real with yourself and being like, hey, like this is the reality now. This is kind of where I am at now. But like you said, could I still have a potential to beat that person from 5 years ago? Of course, right? It just might take some tweaking and some changing, or some patience too. Just
I
not
wanna
easy.
I wanna be, cognizant of your time, but one of the things I wanna talk about because of softening the ego made me think of this. I
Hmm.
think that we as, everyday athletes are really good at putting the pillow down for our ego
Hmm.
after the event,
Yes. Yep.
right? When
Hmm.
it's like, well, if the training would have been this way or that way, well, if the weather would have been this or that, or well, if the humidity wasn't there, like we come up with all of these rationales to
Hmm.
make ourselves feel better. And I want to get your perspective on this. When we do that, are we doing nothing more than digging ourselves a hole for the next training cycle because we've couched all of these things to give ourselves some protection, as opposed to saying, yeah, dude, you didn't take the gel at mile 2 the way you were supposed to. You didn't drink the liquids that you were supposed to. Sure, the weather was hot, but you don't control the weather. but we're softening the blow against our ego that we're not actually analyzing it for what it was so that we can then improve.
Yeah, I think that's again, like, I think you really have to take a step back and reflect, right? So a lot of times I think you gotta, and I always think too, you gotta reflect at different times, right? So like, say you have a really bad performance or a poor performance that aren't up to your expectations, or you didn't meet your goals, right? Like, immediately after reflecting, good, reflect, vent about it, but then do another reflection, maybe a week or two later, and then see how you feel. See if you're saying some of the same things to, like you said, pad your ego a little bit or protect yourself, because that is like, you do want to be careful of that. I think that's a big thing of like, if you're reflecting on it 2 weeks later and you're saying some of the same things, but this time you're having a different feeling about it. Maybe that different feeling is telling you like, oh, maybe I am patting my ego a little bit. Like, I've got to be realistic. I'm like, hey, you know what? I made a mistake here and didn't take a gel at mile 10 or whatever it might be. Right. Like, I think you have to be honest with yourself. And I think that's the key right there. Right. But then also be honest with yourself on the things that you're like, hey, yeah, like, you know what, this did happen and I couldn't control that. So that way you're finding a balance of that too, right? And I think you've got to really reflect on it at different times.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be a lot more reactionary, you know, an
Immediately
hour
after.
after the race or
Yeah.
immediately after, versus, you know what, I've taken a week or 2 weeks to really reflect on it. I used to be someone that I don't post as much as I used to on Instagram, but I used to do it a lot more with my races and stuff. And I would, and I look back and I would wait to sometimes post later on, because I felt like it would allow me to give, like, I don't know, I guess it was therapeutic for me to be like, give myself
Perspective.
real perspective of it, versus
Yeah.
like, you know what, on my Strava, if I update it right away, I'm probably going to be a little more reactionary, towards it. So, yeah.
So are you a Strava user who's like the morning run has to immediately get changed to, 1 by 10 minute strides
Oh
or
no, I used to be a little bit like that, but honestly, I'm pretty bad with updating it now. And maybe that goes with just like what we've been talking about all day with like, or all podcast here of, you just got other things in your life, and it's
that's
like,
it.
not that that's not important. And I like
Yeah.
to go on it, and I like to support people, but like, it's not at the top of my to-do list as maybe it used to be. So,
I know
yeah.
for me, like I almost never update it right away. And then
Really?
like
Yeah.
finally an effort will happen and I'll go in to update it. And there's like seven, notifications like morning run kudos, afternoon
Yeah,
run
yeah.
kudos, late evening run kudos, or whatever. And I'm like, oh, I should probably give it a name by now,
Yeah, I know that's how I feel too now. It's like, oh crap. I was like, man, it's been a few, like, mine will be a week sometimes where I want
Yes,
to, oh, I'm
exactly.
back. It's like, and then it's like, all right, time allows for it, and I can update it right away now, or I
Yep.
go in spurts. So I don't know if
Same.
that's how you are, Jason.
At
Yeah.
100%, the exact same way.
Yeah.
Usually on Sunday, my wife and I will run at the beach. Our long run Sunday, we'll run down by the beach.
Okay.
And when we're having some coffee after the run, is when I'll be like, okay, I'll go update
I love
Strava, and
that.
it'll be like the whole week, just go
Yeah.
in and update
I
Strava
do
that
the
whole week.
same thing. It's on like a Saturday, Sunday, usually the weekend or something. And
Yep.
then I go back, and just update everything. So, yeah.
One question before we jump into our food questions for you is we talked about perspective and maybe you look at it, immediately or an hour afterwards, and then maybe a week later, and then maybe a month later, whatever it might be.
Mhm.
Would you recommend that we journal it, that we write it down so that like in the moment we're writing down
Yeah.
how we actually feel, and then a week later we can actually compare what we thought was happening to what is actually happening now?
Absolutely. I think that's a great exercise. I've used that with athletes before too, and just non-athlete clients that I've had with certain situations that they're getting ready for, or some performance or whatever it might be, right? Yeah, because I think what happens is that gives you might even see some like YouTube streamers do the same thing, or at least I have, at least some of the runners that I follow that are, I guess some are professional runners and stuff, where they'll do a vlog
Okay.
immediately after.
Yeah.
I'm a big Nebraska Cornhusker fan, so there's a YouTuber named Adam Carricker that will, if you watch Nebraska football, they've had some rough times where he'll
Yeah.
do what he calls his reactionary post immediately after the Nebraska game, and
Okay.
then he'll do one like the next day or his next one a couple days later, and there's differences,
Yeah.
right? Because a lot of what you're feeling in the moment, it's healthy. It allows you to vent, get it out, and if you're doing it intentionally like that, that a lot of this stuff is probably going to be like, I know I'm not going to think that way or feel that way probably a day, I mean, not a day, but maybe a week later from now,
Right.
or 2 weeks later, or however long it takes, right? And then you can compare and contrast those things of like, hey, what did I say here? What were the differences, right? And then that, I think, allows you to give a more honest, I guess, reflection on how you actually performed.
Yeah.
Kind of like we were talking about before, right? It's like patting my ego versus not patting my ego on these certain characteristics that I described from my race or performance. So,
Right.
mhm.
100%. Awesome. Peter, thank you so much for your great insight. We're going to jump into again, we call them rapid fire food questions. Man, take your time to think about them. They're super in depth. They might win me a Nobel Peace Prize or a Pulitzer at some point. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Oreos. Are you a fan of the old school Oreo, the double stuffed Oreo, the Oreo thin, or the Oreo cakester?
Oh man, I'm gonna have to go with the double stuffed. I don't know. I want more cream in the middle. So those are the ones I like. Yep. Yep. With milk too.
With
So,
milk. Oh, so are you a dunker then?
yeah, I'm definitely a dunker. 100%.
So we had Jason Fitzgerald on this show a while back, and his
Okay.
tip for all you dunkers was to drop the first Oreo in the glass of milk and let it just disintegrate into mush, basically. Eat your Oreos the way you always would, and then when you go to drink the milk, you get like this rush of Oreo cookie and cream at the end. That was his key to enjoying Oreos.
Huh. I'm gonna have to try that next time.
Yeah.
Then. So
You'll have to report back and see if let me know if Jason Fitzgerald is accurate or not.
yeah. Yep.
Licorice, red or black or none at all?
Oh, red, 100%. Black, absolutely not. My dad used to eat that stuff. Oh my gosh, and he'd eat both, but when he had the black, I was always disappointed. So I cannot do it. I actually had this conversation with my wife the other day. I don't know why we were talking about it, but I can't do black at all.
So Mike and Ike's are out for you?
They are. They're out. It reminds me of the the NyQuil, the green NyQuil.
Yes.
I guess, right?
Yeah.
Like, I can't do it.
And I mean, if you're still, for those of you who drink, and Sambuca was always just awful.
Yeah.
Awful.
Yeah. Yep.
So with the red licorice, are you a red vine or are you a Twizzler guy?
Twizzler. Yeah. I like the Twizzlers better. I don't know what it is about the Twizzlers. I just had one the other day over the 4th of July weekend. Gave one to my son to try, and he seemed to like it. So if he's a little picky sometimes too, so it must be good.
Did you teach him to cut the ends off the Twizzler and drink the Coke through the Twizzler
straw?
straw?
Yeah, I didn't. I should try that. Yeah. Drink the Coke through that or something.
I don't know if your wife will be happy with all that sugar running through the kid.
Yeah, probably not. I gave him a little piece, but I wanted to see if he liked it, and he did. So
wait till Saturday afternoon to give it to him so they could just run around crazy.
I know. Yeah.
Crash out.
All that energy out. Yeah.
Peeps. Are Peeps a real candy, or are they just some nonsensical food that some dude made up and threw some gold glitter on top of?
I consider it a real candy, but a holiday candy. It's something that you have on Easter, right? Or around the Easter holidays, right? I compare it to like my mom makes this great like mint chocolate fudge, right?
Okay.
So and I only ever have that during Christmas, but I think part of it is because it's special during that time.
Yeah.
Right? Peeps, I really don't I mean, I'll eat them, but I don't love them by any means. So I don't know about you. But
you're not running to the grocery store to buy a package of them?
No, I'd go with the Reese's eggs. Those I love those. So yeah.
Reese's is like that's right up there in the candy hall of fame.
Oh yeah. Favorite candy for me.
Oh, okay. Excellent. So that brings up the next question. Candy corn. Is candy corn a real candy, or is it just earwax covered in sugar?
I would put candy corn over real candy versus Peeps, in my opinion.
Okay.
And the reason I do that is because Halloween is that's my favorite holiday, and that's Halloween. So, do I love candy corn? No, but I like it better than Peeps. So,
okay.
Yeah. So I'll give it a real candy, more real than Peeps. So,
yeah. Neither one of those are coming in my house. I just be honest with you.
No. Okay.
Not have them. So we all either have an aunt or a grandmother, grandparents that had the candy bowl. and in the candy bowl was the butterscotch, was the strawberry with the jelly in the middle,
Yep.
and the mint. Which one is Peter taking out of the bowl and hoarding?
Oh, geez. Repeat those ones again. All the ones that you had on
The
strawberry one, the
the
mint.
strawberry one, the mint, and the Werther's butterscotch.
I'm probably going. Oh, geez. I'm probably going with the strawberry one, even though the Werther's ones have grown on me. Like when I was a kid, my grandpa just, he's Mexican, so he would have us listen to like mariachi music and
Yes.
stuff like that with him, and like Mexican music. And then me and my brother Simon, our reward was a Werther's candy.
Okay.
So for a while, like I didn't mind them, but like it wasn't my, favorite thing. But the strawberry ones, that was a grandma thing. So
Yeah.
I like those better. Yeah.
Why are they grandparents' candies? Like, why aren't 20-year-olds eating these things?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't understand that. It's funny because we were talking about that the other day with my wife because her baba, her wife's my wife's grandma's Ukrainian, right?
Okay.
So she always had the strawberry ones.
Okay.
So, and it's like, why do they have that? My grandpa always had the Werther's ones or the butterscotch,
Yep.
So
Yep.
I don't understand it either.
Do you remember the Brock's caramel cube as well? Do you remember
Oh.
seeing those? Because sometimes that would sneak into the candy
Oh,
bowl.
I don't know if I ever had those ones. What are those though?
It's caramel that's in the
Okay.
form of a cube, and they're
Oh,
individually wrapped. And I'm convinced that a dentist invented them because they are so hard that they could probably crack teeth, and you'd be right at the dentist immediately.
wow. I have never had one of those though.
Yeah.
Jason.
Now you
Yeah.
got it. It's Brock's. I'm sure if you go to
Wow.
a
I think I've heard of it, but I've never had it though. I know
if you go to a pharmacy, they probably have them in the hanging aisles there.
Okay, gotcha.
Creamy or crunchy peanut butter?
Creamy. Yeah, I like.
Are
creamy.
you well? You have kids, so I'm presuming there are a lot of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches going around the house.
Yeah. We cut them up into small little slices for Julian, so he's got
Yeah.
a peanut butter and jelly. Yeah. And our dog, we've got a golden retriever.
Okay.
So lick mats. I don't know if you use those or not, Jason. If you have dogs or anything like that.
No.
Okay. Yeah. There's these little lick mats, and it's supposed to mentally wear them out. So we put peanut butter all over it, and then
Yep.
let Millie lick it, go to town on it. So like honestly, Millie probably has the most peanut butter out of it, even more than me. Even though I have a lot, because I don't know, maybe just endurance athlete. We like.
Well,
Yeah, I
absolutely.
love the peanut butter and toast and banana with cinnamon and honey. So,
Yes.
yeah.
So you said you cut them into little sandwiches for Julian. Are you making 4 squares or
Oh.
four triangles? How are you cutting up the bread?
Squares. Yeah.
Squares.
Yep. Little squares for 'em.
Crust on?
Actually, we've peeled the crust off for him because I know how that was for me when I was a kid. So, or at least I know my wife does that too. So, yeah.
You can send all the crust to my house. I love the crust.
Yeah,
I'm all
yeah.
in on the crust.
Yeah. I eat it now though. Thing is, like, I think as I gotten older, it's like I'll just eat the whole thing. It doesn't matter to me. So, yeah.
Is red velvet cake a real flavor, or is it just chocolate cake dressed up to go to the prom?
I think it's a real cake, and I'm only saying that because we had a white red velvet cake for our cake at
Excuse me?
yeah,
What's that?
for our wedding, actually. It was like a white based red velvet cake that we had.
So it had like the alkalized cocoa, but it was white instead of red?
Yeah, no, it didn't have no, it had like what it was like white the main core of it was white in the middle with like the red piece in there.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was different. So with like a white frosting too. So I guess I don't know if do you even consider that red velvet anymore? I guess.
I don't know. I wouldn't absolutely.
Okay.
Actually,
Okay. So maybe it wasn't. I swear that's what they called it though, white red velvet or something like
I
that.
mean, it's marketing. They got to sell it to you.
Yeah. So I don't know. It was good though. I like that. But if you're going with the chocolate, do I consider that real cake? Is what you're asking?
What I'm asking is red velvet a real flavor, or is it just chocolate cake dressed up to go to the prom?
Oh, I consider it a real flavor these days. Maybe because it's popular. It's funny because my brother-in-law is getting married, and they're doing cupcakes, and red velvet was one of the ones that they picked. Actually, we just talked about this the other day. A lot of these are actually like questions that I don't know are real to my life right now. I guess.
You're gonna have to play them the podcast and maybe get them to not use red velvet and instead use what's your favorite cake?
My favorite cake, it might not be the most popular, but if you've got an amazing carrot cake, that's what I would.
Yes, that's it,
Really?
dude.
Oh, wow.
That's the
Yeah.
one.
Dang.
Carrot
Yeah.
cake, get some walnuts in there. I'm a big
Yes.
fan of
Yep.
raisins, so I put raisins in the carrot
Oh,
cake
yeah,
too.
raisins
Sign
are
me up.
good. Yeah, as long as you got the right frosting on it, I think
Yeah,
that's
it had that
Cream
buttercream
cheese.
frosting. Has
Yeah,
to be
gotta
there.
be a good that you get
100%.
that and it's moist, it's good.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
seriously. I was in Sedona a few weeks ago, and I was in the Whole Foods, and I walked past the display case, and they had a vegan carrot cake cupcake, and I was like in heaven. I was like,
Oh,
found my
wow.
dessert.
There you go.
It was
Yeah.
awesome.
Oh, yeah, those are yeah, that's one my mom used to make it for me, like, I'd ask for that for my birthday all the time. So, yep.
We covered the favorite candy, which was Reese's. Favorite flavor of ice cream.
Oh, geez. I'm gonna have to go with, cookies and cream.
That's a good one, man.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
that's
a
I
good
grew
one.
up just loving that one, and I also like the cookies and cream, like, the Hershey's candy bars or whatever.
Yes,
So,
yeah, those are good too.
yeah, so I have to say that's probably my overall unless I go to Dairy Queen, then it's a banana split blizzard. So,
Oh, that's a good call too. That's
yeah,
a really good call.
so
Pumpkin spice or apple cider?
ooh, gosh, I'm gonna go apple cider, I think.
Yes, good
So,
answer.
yeah, yep, mhm,
Chocolate chip or oatmeal raisin cookie?
chocolate chip.
No, bad answer. But
No.
anyway, you've been a great guest until now.
I'll still eat those though, but
Of
I'll go
course you
chocolate
would.
chip first.
Just like I would eat a chocolate chip cookie. I'm not passing on it.
True, true.
Pop Tarts, frosted or unfrosted?
Oh, frosted,
Yeah.
yes.
Favorite flavor of Pop Tarts?
Oh, man. Oh, jeez. It's funny, my go-to, I think, was brown sugar cinnamon when I was a kid, but my favorite probably was still either the hot fudge sundae or the s'mores.
Those are so good, dude.
Those ones are I'd probably go s'mores, probably the
So
top.
for
Yeah.
me, cherry is number one. And the other day I had the strawberry milkshake,
Oh, that's
which
good.
was
Yeah.
it was off the it just reminded me of
Yep.
strawberry Nesquik from
Oh,
when I
yeah.
was a kid. And I was like, that's it.
I
Like,
love that. Strawberry milk. Yep.
yeah.
I like that better than normal milk. So it's like
So
some
then Frankenberry, Blueberry, or Count Chocula, which was your go-to cereal then?
Frankenberry, blueberry or actually, it was probably Count Chocolate is probably what I had most of, to be
Yeah,
honest
because
with
the chocolate, it was probably the
you.
most popular to be able to get off the shelf too. But when you
Yep.
got a blueberry was so good
Yeah,
with
no, that was good
strawberry in
too,
there.
though. Yeah, oh, yeah. I liked all those. Rice Krispie Treat cereal, though, that was, like, my number one. I don't even know if they sell it anymore. So
I haven't seen it, and I spent a lot of time at the grocery store.
yeah, okay. I haven't either, so you have to let me know if you find it.
I will. Last question for you before I let you go.
Yeah.
Tray of brownies has come out of the oven. It's sat on the counter long enough that you can actually enjoy it. Are you taking the corner piece? Are you taking an edge piece? Or are you taking them straight to the middle?
Middle. Yep.
You like the ooey gooey?
I like the ooey gooey. Yep. Yep. You that glass of milk again. So with it. Or ice cream with it too. So,
Yes.
yeah.
So I tell this to anybody who will listen. One of the
Ice
best ways to enjoy a brownie is put it in the bottom of a mug, put coffee ice cream on top of it. And then
uh
as the ice cream melts, you end up making yourself like an affogato mocha type of thing. And
Oh, that's a good
it's
idea.
so good, man.
Man, I gotta try
So
that.
good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Peter, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much
Yep.
for your expertise. Really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to having those articles that we can share with our audience on our website here soon.
Yeah. Appreciate it, Jason. Thanks so much.
Before
Mhm.
I let you go, where can people find you?
Yeah. You can find me. So I work for a company called Scotty Sports Psychology. So SKADI sportpsychology.com is like our main website. We also have an Instagram at Scotty Sports Psychology. I guess I'm on Instagram personally too, if you want to find me there. But those are kind of the main spots that
We'll
I'm.
drop those in the show notes for everybody as well.
Yeah. Mhm.
Appreciate your time. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it, Jason. Yeah.
For those of you who stuck around for the last hour, thank you so much of your time. It means so much to me. Please make sure you subscribe, rate, and review the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. It helps us get great guests like Peter so we can dive into his wealth of knowledge and have some fun all along the way. We will be back next week on July 15th, where I will be joined by, excuse me, Megan McCallum, who has an article on our website today Megan has battled breast cancer to come back and is racing triathlon. And it's a fantastically inspiring and motivating story. So come back next week. And while you're at it, again, make sure you check out the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks for your time. Have a great one.